My aunt handed me an entire building in her will. The relatives who cut me out of their lives 7 years earlier showed up at my door and announced they'd already decided to claim the top 2 floors for themselves. 7 years back, my family chose to walk away from me. Last month, they tried walking back in. Both times, they made the exact same error. I'm Ryan Calloway, 31 years old, and I've spent the past 5 years working as a licensed property assessor in Phoenix, Arizona. My job is simple to describe. I walk through buildings and determine their true worth, floor by floor. My wife Priya jokes that I do this constantly at home without even noticing. She says I'll glance at something and run a silent calculation before I ever open my mouth about it. She's not wrong. On our 3rd date, I looked at her and just knew she was the person I wanted beside me for life. 6 months later, I finally told her that. We've now been married 3 years, and that initial judgment of mine has never wavered. Before I get into what happened, I'm curious where you're tuning in from tonight. We live in a 2-bedroom rental on Crescent Drive, complete with a tiny balcony that Priya has turned into a jungle of 17 plants I've been firmly warned never to touch. Every single one has its own name. She's walked me through the full roster 3 separate times now. I can confidently recall maybe 5 of them. It's not a skill I'm working on improving, and I've accepted that fully. My closest friend is Joel Reyes, a guy I met at 22 during a property assessment course, and we've barely gone a day without talking since. Joel's 33 now and manages properties on the south side of the city. He answers his phone before the first ring even finishes and instantly asks what's wrong, because he can somehow always tell when something's off based purely on the time I'm calling. He's never once been wrong about it. I quit being amazed by that years ago. My aunt Margaret Calloway was my father's older sister. She never married, never had kids. Back in 1994, she bought a 3-story apartment building on Birchwood Lane for $98,000 and ran the place solo for almost 3 decades afterward. She kept a green spiral notebook documenting every single repair and every tenant she'd ever had, dating back to day 1, all written in careful blue ink. She was thorough, dependable, and deeply protective of what was hers. When my family froze me out 7 years ago, Margaret was the lone person who never stopped reaching out. Every Sunday at 8 in the evening, like clockwork, she'd call and never once bring up the family drama. She'd simply ask how my week went and genuinely listen to my answer. During a stretch of life where I felt completely unseen by the people meant to know me best, she was the steady reminder that I hadn't vanished altogether. She died in February from heart failure at 71, peacefully at home, just the way she'd always wanted it to happen. The Birchwood Lane building came to me through her will. 3 stories, 9 separate units, valued at $720,000. I know that figure exactly because she'd asked me to formally inspect the property 8 months before she passed. She'd called one evening and said, "Ryan, I want your professional opinion on the building this week." I showed up Tuesday morning with my clipboard and went unit by unit while she relaxed in the kitchen with her tea and a book. When I gave her the final number, she simply nodded and said, "Good." Just that one word. Looking back, I now fully understand what she was already setting in motion that morning. Probate wrapped up on a Thursday. My family learned about it 9 days afterward. It was a Sunday around 2:30. Priya and I were relaxing on the couch, and she was telling me for the second time that day how beautifully the light was hitting the plant on the windowsill when someone knocked. It was my dad, my uncle Dennis, my cousin Brent, and Brent's wife Angela. My father, 60 years old, hadn't said a single word to me in 7 full years. No texts, no calls, nothing. And yet there he stood at my door on a random Sunday, acting like someone who'd simply been hard to get hold of and was finally stopping by like he'd always intended to. He said, "Ryan," as though that one word could bridge 7 years of silence. I told him to come in. They filed into my living room and sat down. Angela scanned the apartment slowly, clearly running her own mental appraisal of everything inside it. Priya stepped out of the bedroom and stood near the kitchen entrance with her arms crossed, wearing the look she gets when she's deliberately holding her composure together. My dad explained that everyone had discussed it and agreed the building should rightfully stay in the family. He emphasized the word rightfully while looking straight at me as if my inheriting it had simply been some clerical mistake. Uncle Dennis pointed out the building had 3 floors, so the plan was for me to keep the ground level while the family split the top 2. Angela said they'd already sorted out exactly how those floors would be divided, speaking like she was reading from a contract everyone else had already approved. I glanced at Priya. She lifted her eyebrows just slightly, her silent signal that she'd back whatever choice I made. I told them I appreciated them stopping by. Then I told them the building had already sold 3 weeks earlier. The room didn't go quiet, it went still. Those aren't the same thing. Quiet means sound has stopped. Still means people have frozen because what they just heard hasn't fully registered yet. My father asked what I meant by sold. I repeated it plainly. I'd listed it 4 weeks after probate closed, accepted a bid from a real estate investment firm based in Scottsdale, and the sale finalized on the 7th of that month. Done. Finished 3 weeks prior. Angela snapped that I had no business selling it without checking with the family first. I told her I had every right in the world. Margaret left that property to me, not to the family, to me specifically. None of them got a vote in decisions made by someone they'd spent 7 years treating like she didn't exist, let alone me. My father started to say something about what Margaret would have wanted. I cut in and told him to choose his words carefully there. She called me every single Sunday for 7 straight years while everyone in that room pretended I'd disappeared. I knew exactly what Margaret wanted because she told me herself and had set things up so I could carry it out more than a year before she died. Silence followed for a stretch. My father stood, gave me that familiar look he used when he couldn't argue against something but refused to admit it, nodded once and left. Dennis followed him out, then Brent. Angela grabbed her bag off my coffee table and told me on her way out that I'd regret this. I told her I genuinely doubted it. The door shut behind them. Priya sat back down next to me and rested her feet in my lap, right where they'd been before everything started. She glanced at the windowsill plant for a second and mentioned that one was named Matilda. I said I already knew that. She said I absolutely did not. I argued it starts with an M. She reminded me 4 of the 17 plants start with M. I told her that was simply too many plants to memorize individually. She laughed, and something that had been weighing on my chest for ages finally started to lift. Here's how everything had actually been arranged behind the scenes. 8 months before she died, Margaret had me formally walk through the building, landing on $720,000. She said good and moved right along. 2 months after she passed, probate cleared, and I called Joel that very night. He asked what my plan was. I told him I wanted to sell and move forward with life. He said that settled it then. She gave it to you because she trusted you'd know precisely what to do once the moment arrived. The following Monday, I contacted a real estate attorney named Sandra Okafor, who's practiced property law in Phoenix for 19 years and handles every case with the unshakable calm of someone who's seen every possible complication real estate can throw at her. She reviewed the assessment and said she could have it listed within a month. She delivered. An investment group out of Scottsdale bought it for $745,000, with closing finalized on the 7th. Every paper filed properly, clean and quick, exactly how Margaret had positioned me to handle it. My father hasn't reached out since that Sunday. Neither has Dennis or Brent. Angela sent a text 3 days later that I opened once and never replied to. Honestly, I feel calmer about the whole thing than I expected to. You spend 7 years waiting for people to return, and when they finally do, it's only because something unrelated to you dragged them back. That realization makes shutting the door completely that much easier than you'd think. Joel came over for dinner about 2 weeks after the sale closed. Priya cooked her mother's lamb curry recipe, and the 3 of us sat around the table for hours talking about completely unrelated things. At one point, Joel mentioned we could finally afford to buy a place. Priya said we were already house hunting. I brought up the place on Lemon Tree Road with the big yard. She said the yard was specifically for her plants. Joel asked exactly how many plants we were talking about. Priya launched into naming everyone starting from the very first. Joel looked over at me slowly. I raised all 10 fingers, then added 7 more. He looked genuinely worried. I just nodded. She never noticed any of this because she was still only partway through the list. I still catch myself reaching for my phone some Sunday evenings around 8. Old habits never fully disappear, they just turn quieter. Margaret turned into a small pause at the close of every Sunday, a moment of gratitude for someone who kept showing up even when it cost her something, and never once brought it up. I kept her notebook, that green spiral one filled with 30 years of repairs and tenant histories, in careful blue handwriting. The executor included it with her belongings. It sits on my living room shelf now. Priya asked about it once, and I told her the story. She's never suggested I move it since. Some things you simply hold on to. That's really all there is to it.